Psyduck lives with a headache every single second of its life. Not a long day headache. A full-on migraine that never stops, never fades, and has absolutely zero cure anywhere in canon. And by the end of this, you'll understand why that constant suffering is also the only reason Psyduck is even remotely dangerous. Let's start with the obvious, the headache. Multiple Pokédex-style entries across different games describe Psyduck as perpetually tormented by headaches so intense it can barely think straight. Not sometimes, not when stressed, always, right now. As you're watching this, somewhere in the Pokemon world, a little yellow duck is standing in a field holding its head and just suffering. The headache builds up like pressure in a pipe until it cracks and releases psychic energy. Psyduck didn't choose to use and can't aim. Imagine sneezing so hard you accidentally bend a spoon. That's Psyduck's Tuesday. And the worst part? It doesn't even remember doing it afterward. The psychic burst happens, the headache dips slightly, and Psyduck is just standing there with no idea what occurred. Cute, right? Horrifying, actually. And here's where it gets stranger. Psyduck doesn't even fully know what it is. The name says duck. The vibe says duck. But look at the proportions. Flat bill, webbed feet, upright posture, body shape that lines up way closer to a platypus than any actual duck. Some regional entries describe it wandering aimlessly, acting confused about its own instincts, like its body and its brain are running two different programs that never sync. You wake up every morning not knowing if you're a dog or a cat. That's Psyduck's entire identity. And this identity crisis isn't just cosmetic, because it bleeds directly into its type, which leads us to the next layer of suffering. Psyduck is a water type, should love water, should be gliding around lakes, thriving, doing water-type things. Except some entries suggest that when the headache flares hard enough, it disrupts Psyduck's ability to swim properly. It sinks instead of glides. A water-type Pokemon that can't reliably use water. That's like being a fish who gets seasick. The water and psychic coverage it eventually learns is genuinely useful in battle, but getting there requires grinding through some of the most fragile early game stats in the franchise. It has to suffer to become even slightly functional. Okay, here's the first plot twist, and it's a good one. The headache isn't a bug, it's the feature. Every entry that describes Psyduck's pain also links that pain directly to its psychic output. More pain, more power, which means you can't fix Psyduck without destroying what makes it special. There is no version of a healthy, pain-free Psyduck that also has psychic abilities. The suffering is the source. Which makes the most famous Psyduck in franchise history even more tragic, because Misty's Psyduck didn't choose fame either. That Psyduck kept bursting out of its Pokeball uninvited mid-situation at the worst possible moments, and everyone in the anime treated it like a running joke. But canon is clear. The headache threshold triggers the release. Psyduck had no control over when it appeared. Every single entrance was an involuntary psychic event happening to a creature in pain. Imagine falling asleep at your desk and waking up in the middle of a boardroom presentation, except the presentation involves a gym battle and your headache is what's keeping the villain from winning. Misty's Psyduck became one of the most recognized Pokemon in the entire franchise, and not one appearance was on its own terms. Every moment of fame was accidental. Which brings us to Golduck, and this one stings. Psyduck evolves into Golduck, and Golduck is everything Psyduck was trying to be. Sleek, fast, confident, built like a swimmer, no visible headache, described in entries as elegant and powerful in the water. It looks like the hero of the story. You'd think Psyduck finally made it. But here's plot twist number 2. Golduck is still water and psychic, still has psychic abilities, which means the headache didn't disappear. It evolved. It went internal. Golduck carries the same origin, the same psychic burden, just quieter and more controlled. The suffering didn't end. It got more composed. Psyduck spent its entire existence in agony to become a Pokemon that hides the agony better. Gameplay-wise, Golduck's stat spread is genuinely solid. Decent speed, good special attack, access to Surf and Psychic and Ice Beam for coverage. Psyduck is essentially just the loading screen you have to sit through. And while you're grinding through that loading screen, the whole world has already decided what Psyduck is. A joke. Merch, memes, plushies, all built around the image of a confused rubber duck waddling around holding its head. And look, the image is funny. But Psyduck's actual lore is dark and medically strange in ways that almost nothing else in the Pokédex matches. Even within the games, NPCs talk about Psyduck like it's a nuisance or a novelty, not something to take seriously. Imagine being a war veteran and the only thing anyone ever references is your funniest out-of-context moment. That's Psyduck's entire cultural existence. The franchise took one of its most genuinely tragic creatures and turned it into bath toy branding. But here's the final reframe, and this one earns it. When Psyduck's headache maxes out, truly peaks, what comes out isn't a neat controlled psychic move. It's uncontrolled psychic force that doesn't distinguish between enemy and ally. It's not a water gun, it's a broken fire hose. Psyduck at its limit isn't a weapon, it's a disaster. And in battle, that disaster has real teeth. Disable cuts off whatever move an opponent just used. Confusion chips away at mental stability. Psychic hits hard on the special side, and Cloud9 as an ability just casually ignores all weather effects, which is quietly one of the strangest and most strategic tools in its kit. No one expects the confused duck to be weather immune. No one expects the confused duck to matter. And that's the third and final plot twist. Every Pokemon has a weakness. Psyduck's weakness is itself. It can't separate its power from its pain, can't perform without suffering, can't be healed without being hollowed out. The thing that makes it dangerous and the thing that makes it miserable are the exact same thing. And somehow, through all of it, the constant headache, the identity confusion, the involuntary fame, the evolution that just made the suffering quieter, the world that turned it into a meme, Psyduck never stopped waddling forward. So yeah, cute? Absolutely. Cursed? Completely. But maybe the most honest Pokemon in the entire Pokédex, because it never once pretended the pain wasn't there.